All right, well, everybody, welcome to the final day, our last day of the online citizenship class. So we've made it to week 13, and we've got a lot of information to cover here in the last class. And we will talk at the end of our time about the new changes to the citizenship test and give you a chance to look over some of the questions. Of course, we don't have time to cover all of the questions here in our class time. And again, we'll talk about that at the end. But let's go ahead and we're going to go right back to the N400 application. Last week we started looking at part 12 of the application. And again, if you remember, part 12 of the application is probably the hardest, the most difficult part of the application to kind of talk about. But again, as we have seen in the application, as we go back and look for just a moment, most of the questions in this part of the application are asking about your whole life. So that's why it's so important that we understand the questions that they're asking us. They're asking us about, again, did you belong to any organizations, memberships? What about particular activities like illegal activities, for example, not paying your taxes. So this week, we're going to be starting with the section of talking about your particular criminal record. If you have any particular record of, for example, have you ever been arrested? Have you ever been, caught with a particular crime or offense? Now, again, remember, we're not going to discuss your personal history here on this part of the application, but you need to understand that, again, this part of the test, so the part that we're looking at here today, is talking about your whole life, not just your time in the United States. So please remember that this includes your time in your country as well. Now, what I would like to do, just to get us started, again, we don't have time to ask every question or look at every question, but I want you to notice again, let me zoom in here so we can see, that the questions on this part of the application are very similar to the questions we've seen last week. Have you ever? Okay, everyone, let's just say that. Have you ever?
You ever?
Have you ever?
Right,
Have you
right.
ever?
So all of these questions are asking about have you ever. Ever means your whole life, your whole life. Now again, we don't have time to repeat every question, but I want you to notice, for example, like 22, 23, all of these, have you ever committed a crime? Have you ever been arrested? Have you ever been convicted of a crime? All of these particular questions, remember, we need to be able to answer no to these questions. If you answer yes, you're going to have to explain what happened. So again, if you never paid for, if you have speeding tickets from your country, or if you have one ticket here from the United States, again, you have to make sure you explain. Now, we'll look at the application where we need to put that information. Now, again, we don't have time to look at every question, but for example, in the instructions, take a look at the instructions. Okay, so I'm going to kind of highlight the instructions here. Okay, it says if any of item numbers 22 through 28 apply to you, you have to answer yes. Okay, now if they don't apply to you, then you would answer no. Okay, and that's good. If hopefully you can answer no to all of these questions. But notice what it says here. Let me show you. So I'll zoom in just a little bit on this part. It says, even if your records have been sealed, expunged, or otherwise cleared. Now let's talk about those words for just a moment. Okay, so if you look over on the right side of the screen, sealed means that it's no one can see it. So for example, when you write a letter, right? Do you guys still write letters? Do you write letters to people? Christmas cards, maybe? Maybe not. You know, when you put the letter inside of the envelope, right? You have the envelope and then you go and you close it. Okay? That is sealing the envelope. You are sealing the information. So sealed means that your record is inside of an envelope that nobody can see. So that's what it means. It says if your records have been sealed, that means that no one can see them. The next word, expunged. Expunged means erased. Erased, like a pencil. You know, a pencil can erase. So if you had a crime and you did your service, you know, for example, here in the United States, if you have a speeding ticket, okay. Now, usually with speeding tickets, if you go to traffic school, right? So if you go to traffic school, then usually they will, you know, erase that particular ticket. So that's what expunged means. Usually expunged means, especially if you committed a crime before you were 18 years old. But again, there are many different ways to erase crimes, okay? Now, I'm only explaining this because you need to know that if you have any issues about your legal history, you might need to talk to a lawyer, okay, an attorney and a lawyer, someone who might be able to help you if you have any of those issues. Okay. Now again, don't tell me. Okay, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not the government, but please remember that they know everything about you. So again, on this part of the application, you have to be honest. So if you answer no to these, then that's it. You're fine. That's good. But if you answer yes, even if this was a long time ago, or if the records were sealed, right, no one can see them, or if they were expunged, you still have to answer these questions. Okay? So again, my recommendation, you know, make sure you look at all of the questions to make sure you understand what they're telling you. Okay, now let's go ahead and look at the whole section, this part, 22 to 28, and then you will notice that at 29, this is where you have to explain a little bit if you have answered yes to these questions. Okay, so again, looking at 22 through 28, for example, look at number 28. Number 28 says, have you ever been in jail or prison? Okay, so let's zoom in on that one for a moment. Okay, so jail or prison. Now, jail is usually a short term, like 1 night, 2 nights, you know. Prison, of course, is longer. So again, if you had any particular problems in your country, you have to answer these questions. You have to answer them. So if you said yes, you have to say exactly how many years or months or days. Now, my experience is that usually if you've been in jail or prison, your chance of becoming a citizen is probably very small. In fact, now it's probably 0. So I'm just being honest with you now that that's a big change, I think, and that they do not want anyone to have any criminal records to be citizens. So, but if you answered no to 22 through 28, that's fine. But look at number 29. Okay, so that's what we're going to look at here. I'm going to zoom in here on 29. So with this part of 29, notice here is where you have to put any of that information. If you answered yes, you have to put that information here in this box. Okay. Now, if you look at my little pink slip here, the pink here is explaining all of the words that we see. So everyone, again, if you want to turn on your microphones, let's say these words together. Okay. Are we ready? All right. So let's say these words: arrested.
Arrested.
Cited.
Cited.
Detained.
Detained.
Charged.
Charge.
Okay. Now, so arrested means taken to jail. So were you actually taken to jail? That's what arrested means. Cited. Cited means did they give you a ticket? Or even a warning. Okay, now again, if you've gotten a speeding ticket, okay, don't worry, we're all humans, right? Sometimes we get speeding tickets. Now, this does not include parking tickets, okay? Parking tickets are not the same as speeding tickets, but hopefully you've paid your parking tickets, okay? Yeah, I hope you're inside of your car, you don't have 20 parking tickets that you have not paid, okay? Detained. Detained means stopped by the police, but maybe not arrested. Now, sometimes we're detained for a little while because maybe they're trying to find some information. So maybe you weren't arrested, but you were stopped by the police. And charged. Charged means officially charged with a crime. So for example, did you actually go to court? Did you have to say something to a judge? That's what these particular words mean. Okay, now everyone, let's say these words one more time. Arrested,
Arrested.
Arrested.
cited,
Cited.
detained,
Detained.
charged.
Charged.
Okay, all right, you can turn your mics off for just a moment. Now, again, you don't have to tell me anything, but I will tell you now, even if you had a speeding ticket 20 years ago, you have to put it on this document. You have to put it on this document because it says, have you ever? Have you ever? Remember, Part 12 is your whole life, not just the United States. Now, honestly, sometimes even if you were pulled by the police because, for example, maybe let's show you an example. Maybe you had a license, the license plate on your car. Maybe it was needed to be changed or updated. So, for example, maybe the police just pulled you over and they gave you, excuse me, let me put it here on this, so if I can get the text here. Okay, there we go. For example, if I said expired license plate. So, for example, if you had an expired license plate, like you just haven't put the sticker, sometimes they give you a little sticker to put on your license plate if you're driving. So, for example, even if you had an expired license plate and the police just pulled you over to say you've got an expired license plate, you need to put it here. If you have any particular, if the police stop you for any reason, you need to put it here on the document. You need to remember the date, when did it happen, what was the city? Okay, so for example, maybe you could say, oh, for example, I don't know, Newport, Kentucky, just an example. And then notice the last one says the outcome. The outcome means what happened. Now, if you notice, look at the look here carefully. Even if it says no charges filed or charges were dismissed. So, for example, here for my expired license plate, usually police gave warning, no charges. Even if the police just gave you a warning, put it on the document. Okay? So anytime that the police pulled you over for any reason, put it here on this particular part of the application. Okay, so it's very, very specific, and you have to remember. Oh my goodness. Okay, now guys, I am not a perfect person. I've had a couple of times. For example, this has happened to me before. I've had an expired license plate, and the police, pulled me over and said you need to make sure you update your license plate. It happens to everybody. That's not a bad thing necessarily. But remember, that's not a crime. That's not, if you never paid for the license plate, that's a problem. But in this case, if it happened, that's fine. Okay, so again, just remember that you need to put any type of situation where maybe the police have stopped you. Okay, now I'm going to stop for just a moment and see if I have any questions. Now, please don't ask me any specific questions about you, but if you have a question in general, like what happens if this happens, or is this an example? So does anybody have a question about that? Let's see, Elaine, your connection's a little difficult to hear. Say it again. Yeah. Yeah, Elaine, I only heard a little bit of that. Elaine, could you do me a favor? Yeah, maybe put your question in the chat box. If you want to send me a private message, uh, you can send it because unfortunately your connection's kind of cutting a little bit. Okay, yeah, so I don't know. Okay, so does anyone else have a question?
Nope. No, for me it's clear.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, so maybe Elaine, if you can, if you want to put it in the chat box. Unfortunately, I think the connection's a little bad here. Well, kind of, yes.
Okay.
It's just for some. For some reason, the connection's just kind of bad. A little bit. Yeah, it's still cutting a little bit. Okay, maybe if you want to ask me later, if you can put it in the chat box, okay? I heard something about a ticket. So that's all I heard was about it. Was it a speeding ticket? If it's any kind of ticket like a speeding ticket, yes. Now, generally parking tickets are not included, but speeding tickets, yes. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I don't know. We're having a connection issue today, so okay. All right. Well, no other questions. Then again, like I said, if you do have specific questions about your situation, again, you might have to talk to a lawyer or an attorney if you have any other questions like that. Okay, well, guys, let's keep going because again, we still got some stuff to go through. Now, for question 30. Many of these particular situations are again not you need to be able to answer no to these questions, but if you'll notice, some of these are more of what we consider national type problems or federal problems, or for example, if you notice, letter C mentions drugs, so of course that's a bad thing. Letter A, if you notice, it says been a habitual drunkard. Does anybody know what drunkard means?
No, no. Uh, is it who drink a lot, beer
Yeah,
or
yeah.
alcohol?
For example, you might know the word alcoholic when someone drinks too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, so drunkard basically means like being drunk in public. So, for example, did you get lots of, citations or tickets for being drunk in public? So generally drunkard, that's what drunkard means. So I wasn't sure if anybody knew. But if you notice, many of the questions here are talking about, for example, did you try to, like letter E, for example, marry someone to become in order to obtain an immigration benefit. Now, of course, it's perfectly fine to marry someone from the United States. Okay, so that's not a problem. But sometimes, for letter E, sometimes people try to marry somebody so they can stay in the country. And in fact, we kind of have a nickname for that. Often they call them green card marriages. So again, it's perfectly fine to marry somebody from the United States, but you may hear this sometimes. Often people get married so they can stay in the United States, and generally, when you're married to an American, they have to you have to prove that we're married. We live together. We do have the same address. Um, so keep in mind that's what they're talking about. People who are basically faking being a fake sort of marriage. So sometimes they call those green card marriages, which is, that's not a good thing. But again, it's perfectly fine to be married to an American. But again, sometimes it happens. Okay. Again, for many of the questions here, they're asking about did you gamble money, illegally. Now, for example, you may be surprised by this, but if you go to what city is famous for gambling? Does anybody know what city?
Las Vegas.
Yeah. No, wait a minute. You answered that one very quickly. So, have we been to Las Vegas before?
No, I wish I want to, but no, never.
Well, yeah, for example, if you go to Las Vegas and win money, that's perfectly fine. But Gisela, I don't know if you know this, but if you win money, you actually have to pay taxes on it. So just remember that if you fill out your tax form and you go to Las Vegas and win, millions of dollars, first off, don't forget your English teacher. But
Okay.
then you have to, so just remember you have to pay taxes on it. It's true, you do. Now, here's a funny story, everybody. Do we know Newport, Kentucky? Do you guys know Newport?
Yeah.
Yeah? Well, Newport, do you know what Newport's nickname was many, many years ago? It was called Little Las Vegas.
Oh.
Yeah, because Newport was famous for illegal gambling. It's true.
Oh.
In fact, they still people still might do it today. I don't know, but it is true. And actually, you can take. Of course, COVID is a problem right now, but actually, you can take tours of the city, and you could take where places where famous people used to go gambling, and So now, do you guys know Frank Sinatra,
Yeah.
the famous singer?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
he came to Newport many years
Oh.
ago. Yeah, it's true. He gambled money, okay?
Wow.
It's true.
Mr. John, I have
Hmm.
a question. That's illegal places, right? I mean, no, it's a normal casinos. It's, I mean, I'm talking.
Well, in Kentucky, it's illegal, yes.
Yeah.
So in Newport, it was illegal. But if, for example,
Oh.
if you go to like for example in Indiana, okay, now for example, if you go to the casino in Indiana, that's fine, that's legal. If you bet money on horses, the horse race, that's legal in Kentucky. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
Gisela, the thing is, you just have to pay taxes on it.
Okay.
Okay, so just remember, right? If you're suddenly driving a nice Cadillac, all right, or Mercedes, or nice car, they might say, "Where did you get all this money?" And you're like, "Oh, I'm a good businessman, right? Businesswoman." Uh,
I was living in Newport, Kentucky before for a couple months, and I never
yeah.
see nothing.
Well, that's because it's secret.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay. So just
Okay.
actually, my wife has a good friend, and his father was like a super famous gambler. Like he would go to all the secret places in Covington and Newport and gamble money. So yeah, so be careful. Now the lottery is legal. That's fine. Playing the lottery is fine. But just remember, Gisela, yes, if you win money in gambling, you have to pay taxes on it. So that's what it says here, from illegal gambling. So yeah, there are some places like Las Vegas, Nevada, for example, where it's legal. Okay, all right, all right. Let's not get into the history of Newport, right? Letter H. If you notice, I circled the word alimony. Does anybody know what alimony means?
Nope.
Okay, well, if you look at the first part of the question, it says failed to support your dependents. So the question first is, what is a dependent? Anybody know?
My son.
Yeah, you're basically the people you are responsible for. So usually it's your children. Okay? So, for example, if you're divorced, alimony is the money that we often pay to support our children. So, for example, if you're divorced, you're separated, and maybe the children live with one parent and not with you, you would pay alimony. Generally, that's the case here in the United States. So if you do not pay alimony, if you forgot to pay it or you're supposed to pay it and you didn't, then that's illegal, and you can not become a citizen for that situation. So again, alimony is the money we pay in divorce to support our children. Now, usually in the United States, alimony is finished when the children turn 18. So when the children become adults, then you don't pay alimony anymore. Okay, so that's, again, all of these questions, if you notice it says, have you ever? Again, a lot of these questions are about other illegal activities. Again, drinking in public, prostitution, drugs, green card marriages, gambling illegally. Again, you need to be able to answer no to all of these questions. Okay, so just remember that's very important, and especially now, you have to be able to answer no, because if you answer yes, you'll probably never become a citizen. Okay, all right. So guys, we're about almost at the halfway point of our time, so I want to make sure we don't run out of time here. Uh, for the remaining, say it again. A little bit, yes. A little bit, Elaine. Yeah, we're still having a connection issue. Yeah, that's correct. Child support is the money we would pay. Yeah, yeah. Alimony is usually used to pay to support the spouse. Yeah. But in this example, Elaine, they're considering alimony to be both.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So that's if you have dependents, they're considering it to be both. Yeah. Okay, so again, just to finish up this part here, uh, this next section here is kind of interesting because basically it's talking about how you came to the United States. Did we come legally or not? So for example, for 32, 33, it mentions how did you come into the United States? Did we come in legally? Did we have the correct documentation? Notice I circled the word fraudulent. Fraudulent means fake. Did we lie about it? So this, again, this is an important part of the application. Notice question number 33. Deported. Have you ever been deported from the United States? Now, again, many years ago, it was often very easy for students, if they were deported, sometimes they would come right back in through Mexico. It was, 20 years ago or so, it was a little bit easier. So keep in mind, again, some of my students in the past have talked about, trying to cross back into the country. And remember, that's not good. So in this case, you have to be able to answer no to all of those questions. Okay, so being removed or deported, you need to be able to answer no to those questions too. Okay, all right, let's continue. So again, just kind of finishing up this particular section. The last particular part here, starting with 37. So I'll zoom in here so we can see. So I can zoom in there. Okay, so question 37 asks, have you ever served in the United States Armed Forces? Now, you might remember last week the Armed Forces is referring to the military. Now, again, if nobody here has served in the military, then easily you would put no for this question. I think I've had only one student who's ever worked or served in the military. But if you notice, if it says, are you currently a member? So if you are in the military, yes or no. And if you answered yes, are they going to send you to another country overseas? So again, if none of this applies to us, I won't spend a lot of time on this section of the interview. But I do want you to notice that in serving in the military, if you look at 39, 40, 41, all of these are talking about if you were in the military, but then you got in trouble. For example, in question 39, I've circled the word court-martialed. Court-martialed. If you look over on the right side, court-martial means basically to be removed by the military, from the military by legal force. So for example, if you committed some crime while you were in the military, basically it means they are going to put you in jail. So you were removed from the military. So in this case, again, if this doesn't apply to you, then you're fine. Again, most of the rest of the questions are, did you leave the military illegally? Did you leave before your time was finished? So again, this probably does not apply to anybody in the class. But I do want to mention the last question I circled here, and it's the word deserted. Deserted. Now, you might say, Mr. John, dessert, isn't that ice cream and cake and candy? Well, no. In this case, this meaning of the word dessert, if you'll see it here on the screen, it's pronounced like dessert, right? But the question is not, did you ever get ice cream from the military? Okay, that's not the question. Dessert means, did you leave the military illegally before your time was finished? So again, when someone deserts the army, for example, it means they left illegally. They left before their time was finished. Okay, now I don't think anything here is going to apply to you. But again, just to explain the types of questions that you see on this part of the application. So again, that's what desert means. It means to leave illegally, to leave before your time is finished. Okay, all right, now guys, we're almost to the end of this section. I told you, it's a lot of information on this section of the interview. But do I have any questions at all about anything that you see here on the screen from questions 32 to 43? Any questions? Do we feel okay about this part?
I'm okay.
Yes, Mr. John.
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody that if you're answering no to these questions, they probably will not ask you these questions. Okay, so I think that's important, but be careful. They could. They might ask you, for example, have you ever been arrested? Okay, I mean, so again, some of the questions we've talked about today, they might, but they're probably not going to ask you every question on the application. That's probably not going to happen. So, but again, you need to be prepared. You need to be familiar because you're answering these questions, right? Okay. Okay, guys, we are almost to the end. So part 12 again is very long. So what I want to mention here at the end is something we're going to talk about in just a few minutes. Now, if you remember back in the first part of the class, we mentioned selective service. Everyone, let's say that together. Let's turn on our microphones. Let's say this together. Okay, we ready?
Yep.
Selective service.
Selective service.
Okay. Now, if you remember, the question in the interview was, at what age do we need to be to apply for selective service? Do you remember the answer?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so it's the answer for a lot of things. It's basically 18, but but on the application you'll notice it says between 18 and 26. So again, 18 years old. If you're a male who's 18, you have to apply for selective service. Now, of course, Belisario, I don't know if you're 26, right? Are you 26, Belisario?
No.
Okay. You don't have to tell me how old you are. It's okay. But the idea here, guys, is that selective service is a requirement for all American citizens who are men. So, for example, when I was 18, I had to apply when I turned 18 years old.
I think, Mr. John, that's why they go to high school in 12th grade, and they propose for the students if they want to apply to a military.
Mm-hmm.
That's why.
Well, yeah. So that was the original purpose of the selective service. Saba was generally if they needed people to serve in the military, they would use the selective service information to recruit. So in this case, since no one here fits the situation, you would put no, and then you don't have to fill out the other information. But still, if you notice, it says here, I want to circle this, especially for Belisario. So it says here for number 2, if you're 26 to 31 years of age, you must attach a statement explaining why you did not register. So again, this is something you need to think about. So Belisario, are we 31 years old?
No.
All right, so we're older than 31?
35.
You didn't have to tell me, Belisario. It's okay. But in this case, Belisario, you don't have to worry about this part of the application either. But again, sometimes I get students who might be, 26, 27. So in this case, everybody, no problem. We just answer no to this question. Okay, now finally, we're at the end of part 12, and this part is very interesting because we're going to see it again in just a few minutes. Now, this last part of the application is called the Oath of Allegiance. Now, you might remember many weeks ago. Do you remember the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, so we mentioned, for example, when children, they put their hand over their heart.
Yeah.
I pledge allegiance. Okay. Now, this is not the Pledge of Allegiance, but this is something similar. This is what you are going to say during your naturalization ceremony. So, for example, when you finish the interview and they say, congratulations, you passed the interview, you're going to be a citizen. When you go to the naturalization ceremony, you will say the Oath of Allegiance. Now, the Oath of Allegiance is actually here on this paper. Now, the first thing I want you to understand is you have to put yes for all of these answers because they want to know, are you going to show allegiance? Are you going to show love and loyalty to the United States? So guys, we have to put yes for all of these answers. Now you might say, Mr. John, what do they mean? Well, we're going to talk about them in just a moment because we're going to practice the Oath of Allegiance together. Okay, but for this part of the application, for 45 to 50, got to put yes, because the question here is, are you going to support the United States? Well, of course, we're going to be a citizen. So in this case, that's why we put yes for these answers. Okay, so we'll come back and talk about the oath of allegiance in just a few minutes. All right, now guys, for the last parts of the application, parts 13 and 14, real quickly, I just want to mention part 13 is your statement and certification and signature. So for example, I've circled here for number 1, which one are we going to choose, A or B? Well, guys, you're taking this class, you're practicing your English, so the answer for question number 1 here, or statement number 1, needs to be letter A, because it says, I can read and understand English, and I have read and understand every question and instruction on this application and my answer to every question. So guys, keep in mind that for most people who apply for citizenship, unless they are 55 or 65, in this case, pretty much everybody has to be able to answer with letter A. I can read and understand English. Okay, so listen carefully. Do not use an interpreter. Do not try to put B for an interpreter for this question. Okay, because nobody in this class qualifies for an interpreter for the application. You have to be a certain age and you have to live in the United States for a certain period of time. Well, this does not apply to anybody in this class. Okay, so in this case, you must answer letter A. Okay, and again, my recommendation for number 2, do not choose somebody to prepare the document unless you have some very difficult legal situations. I've had some students who come from, communist countries or countries where it's difficult to get their information. But if you are not using a lawyer, do not check number 2. Okay, because we don't want somebody else to prepare this document. All right, because again, you have to go through the interview. You have to speak English in the interview. So everybody, please note, you have to be able to mark letter A. Okay, but that's it for part 13. All right. So make sure we do that. You have to be able to sign it and date it. So guys, when you sign the document and date the document, and then notice part 14, remember what I said. You are not using an interpreter. So this section is not required. So look at my little yellow box there. You should not need an interpreter for this application because you do not qualify for it. Nobody in this class is 55 or 65 with those particular requirements. Okay? So again, part 14, not for you. So do not fill out part 14. Okay, do we understand? Okay, so no interpreters. Okay, question.
You mean the
So you remember, Elaine, there are certain people who can request an interpreter if they meet certain requirements. So, but the truth is, nobody in this class meets those requirements. You have to live in the United States for a certain period of time, and nobody in this class has been here 20 years. Yeah, so those are only for specifics. Yeah. So for example, Elaine, sometimes I have students who bring their parents, many years ago, and their parents are too old to pass the English part of the test. So often they might get an interpreter. You do not need an interpreter, okay? You do not fit those requirements. Okay, so I just want to make that clear. So you might be 55, but you don't meet the other requirements, for example, okay? All right. Okay, guys, now, part 15 is the same. This section is only if you used a lawyer or attorney to help fill out the application. And again, my recommendation is do not use a lawyer or attorney unless you have a very difficult situation. Okay, so again, part 15 is not for you either. Okay, so again, you are the person who is preparing this document, not a lawyer, not an attorney, not an interpreter. So again, part 15, not for you either. Okay? Okay, and then finally, I want to make this clear. Here at the last part of the application, look what it says. Okay, so look at it very carefully. Do not complete parts 16, 17, or 18 until the USCIS officer instructs you to do so at the interview. So basically, you will stop. You will stop on the document. Let me go back. You will stop at part 13. You will check A because you prepared it yourself. You understand English. You will sign your name and you will put a signature. Okay? So parts 14 and 15, not for you. And then when you get to 16 and 17 and 18, these are the parts you're going to do at the interview. Do we understand? Yes?
Yeah.
Now, I want to remind you about part 17, by the way. Do you remember last week? Do I have any princes or kings or queens in this class? Not the queen,
No.
not the queen of your house, not the
Uh-huh.
prince of your
Yeah.
apartment. Okay. So again, during the interview, they're going to ask you, are you a nobility? Are you a title? Of course, the answer is no here, right? Okay. So that's what that's what part 17 is asking. Okay, guys. We did it. We got through the application for the N400. And now the last part, which I think is very important, it's the oath of allegiance. Now, let's go ahead. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this part of the application because we're going to practice the oath. But what I want you to do first, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and bring this up next. We're going to watch a little video. Now, if your connection is bad, I apologize. So I'll send this to you in your email too. But the idea is, for this part of the presentation, we're going to watch a little video. And so basically, after you pass the interview, so after you take the interview, you pass all of the sections, you'll be asked to attend a naturalization ceremony. Now, most of the time, the ceremonies happen maybe a week or 2 weeks after your interview. Sometimes it might be the same day. It just depends. Now, I think with COVID, for example, it's probably not going to be at the same day. But during the ceremony, one of the things that is required by the Constitution is to repeat the naturalization oath. That is required. It is actually in the Constitution. So in this case, we're going to watch a video. What's going to happen on that wonderful day? What are we going to do on that wonderful day? So guys, I'm going to go ahead and bring up this video. This is from... But anyway, okay, now guys, what I'd like to do is let's practice the oath. Now I'm going to go ahead and ask everybody to turn off your microphones. Turn off your microphones because we don't want to hear the echo or repeating of everybody. But I just want you to say it after me. Now on the left side here I have the oath. Okay, and then on the right side I have kind of the translation, because the oath is a very difficult thing to understand, and so I've kind of translated it into more hopefully easier English. But I want you to get the opportunity to at least say the oath. Okay, so again, don't turn on your microphones, but just practice with me. So we're going to imagine that you're at the naturalization ceremony. So let's say these with me. So guys, just repeat after me. Again, don't turn on the mics, but just repeat after me. I hereby declare on oath that I absolutely and entirely renounce and abjure all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty, of whom or which I have heretofore been a subject or citizen. Okay. Now, if you look at the right side, here's the translation. You don't have to repeat the translation. The translation is, I legally promise that I'm not a citizen of another country, and that I will cut all my legal connections to that country, including any royal titles like prince or princess. Okay? All right, that's the first part. All right, let's continue. Okay, now again, repeat after me. That I will support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same. Okay, now look on the right side. The translation is that I support the laws of the United States and that I will fight against any of their enemies. So again, if you have to go to the military, if it's possible, and that I show my support of the Constitution and the laws in public. So that's what it means. That's why you're there. You're supporting it in public. Okay? All right, guys, keep going. We got more to go. All right, repeat after me. That I will bear arms on behalf of the United States when required by the law, that I will perform non-combatant service in the armed forces of the United States when required by the law. Okay, now over on the right side, it says that I will join the military and fight for the United States if I'm required to. Okay, so again, only if you're required. And that I will do other services for the military if the United States requires me to do it. Okay, this is true of all citizens. All right, guys, we're almost finished. Okay, repeat after me. That I will perform work of national importance under civilian direction when required by the law, and that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. So help me God. Okay. Now again, the translation says that I will perform other important work for the government if necessary, and that I promise to do this of my own free choice. So I'm doing this because I want to. No one is forcing me to. And I'm telling the truth, truthfully, and without any worries or any concerns. So help me God. Okay, guys, that is the naturalization oath, and that is what's included at the end of the application. So during the naturalization ceremony, you will be repeating this, okay? Now, sometimes if you watch those videos, and you can go to YouTube, you can type in naturalization ceremony, and you can see lots of people have recorded their naturalization ceremonies. Many years ago, I showed one video, and it was a video of a guy leaving his house. He was like recording it with his phone. He was showing that he was in the car, he was driving to the courthouse, he was showing everything. Yeah, so that's a little long. But anyway, you can go to YouTube and find any of these videos, and sometimes you'll see the people when they're saying the naturalization ceremony, they're just kind of going blah 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 because they don't understand the words. It's hard. They're difficult words to say. That's because they're old. This is the language of the Constitution. But guys, this is what you're going to say the day of your naturalization ceremony. Now, finally, they might also ask you to say the Pledge of Allegiance. Remember the Pledge of Allegiance? You put your hand on your heart. And some ceremonies actually include the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be on a piece of paper, and they make you say it there too. Okay? So again, these are all very important steps because it's required. It's required by the Constitution. All the senators, all the congressmen, everybody, they have to say the oath as well. It's a little different, but it's almost exactly the same. So guys, that's what everyone does when they become a citizen. Okay, guys, well, we're almost to the end of our time. Now, I want to take the last just couple of minutes and let's talk about the changes made for the 2020 citizenship. Now, the first thing I want to remind everybody is, of course, we did not have the chance to include any of the changes from the proposed 2020 citizenship test. So I do want to make a few things clear. For example, we practice with 100 questions. The new test has 128. So there are several more questions on the application. And if you notice, the second point says, remember, you had to get 6 questions correct and you had 10 chances. Well, now you have 20 chances to get 12 questions correct. So those are the proposed changes, and they've been put into place. In fact, they were active as of last Tuesday. So December 1st was the date. Now, remember, these changes were not made public until November. So the problem is we could not have shared any of that information anyway. So that, by the way, that is the only part of the interview that has changed. The English part where you have to write a sentence and read a sentence, that part has not changed. Now, I do want to mention what we talked about before. After January 20th, when the next administration, the next president comes into office, we don't know if they're going to keep these changes. These changes were made so late that there's a possibility that the next administration might keep the 100 questions instead of the 128. So what I'm going to tell everybody in this class is we're going to offer the citizenship class again in 2021, but in March. And we're not going to offer the class until March because we want to wait and see what's going to happen with the test. Okay, so everybody here in the class, if you want to take the class again, or if you want to take parts of the class again, please understand that we're not going to offer the class again until March because we're going to wait and see what's going to happen with these questions. Now, I want to ask everybody right now, does anybody actually have an interview scheduled right now? Has anybody actually scheduled an interview?
No.
Nope.
No.
Okay. Okay. So just remember that the 100 questions that we studied before, those were active only for people who had applied before December 1st. So guess what? That does not apply to anybody here in the class. So if you were going to apply for citizenship right now, you would be taking the test with 128 questions. Now, keep in mind though, after January 20th, we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. So that's why we're going to wait until March to offer the next citizenship class in case anybody wants to review any of the questions. Now, like we said before, we're not going to be able to cover those changes here today. We do not have time to do that. It would take, again, weeks to go through and review all of the changes. So what we're going to do instead is I'm going to send you a video that has all of the new questions on there. Now, most of the questions have not changed. Many of the questions are still the same. Maybe they've changed some of the words. Maybe they've changed how you answer the questions. So what I'm going to do for you is here, someone was nice enough last week to put together a document that compares the 2008 test to the 2020 test. Now, again, everybody, you will get a copy of this in your email. And you will also get a video that basically will help you to practice these questions. But for now, all I'm going to tell you is we don't know what's going to happen after January 20th. So if you're not ready to apply, if you've got time to apply, again, you might want to wait a little bit to see if the 2020 changes are going to stay. But I just want to show you that here in the document, on the left side of the document is the changes, the 2020 test. On the right side of the document is the 2008 test. Now, if you notice, I just want to show you real quickly here right at the beginning. For example, if you notice that this is a question that is new, that is not included in the 2008, it will say new question. So for example, if you look at question number 1, it says, what is the form of government of the United States? Now, I mentioned to you many weeks ago that the United States is what we call a representative republic, which is kind of like a democracy, but not exactly. So in this case, the answer republic, this is a question that is not on the 2008 test. So keep in mind, if it's a new question, it will say new question. If the question is the same, it will say no change. So for example, question 2 says, what is the supreme law of the land? 2020, same question and the same answer. Constitution. Now, if you look at the next questions, sometimes they will show you that they've changed a little bit. For example, on the 2020, it says for question number 3, name one thing the Constitution does. Now, the Constitution does a lot of things. So if you notice in the 2008 test, it says, what does the Constitution do? And the answer was sets up the government. Well, here, if you notice the answer, one of the answers is forms the government. Now remember, the question says name only one thing. So the idea here is this document will help you compare the two different tests and to help you show where there's some changes and where there are some new questions. So keep in mind, guys, there is obviously no way we could have covered all of those questions, those changes in one class or even two. So what I'm going to do for you is I'm going to send you this document, and we will also send you a video where you can kind of see the questions and you can practice along with the questions. And of course, another video just to help you prepare for the interview. Okay, so guys, as you can see, we really did not have enough time to review all of those changes. And again, after January 20th, they may not stay. We don't know. Okay, so that's why we're going to wait until March to offer our next class.